Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Ru Castro, fashion and beauty photographer based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I thought it'd be cool to take you guys into my post-processing and give you an idea of what my color correction looks like. I'm about to start working on a photo shoot just from yesterday in New York, and I thought this can be a great example to show what my color correction process looks like before an image makes it into retouching. Perfect. So for me, I think it's very important when I start to work on an image or to start working on a session when I'm into the post processing to know what's going to be my goal and what is going to be the mood and vibe of a photo. For example, in this shoot, I know that I wanted the colors to be super vibrant and the sky to be extremely blue and be in one of those images that really, really stands out. We wanted the color to be the icon of this photo. Cool. Let's get started real quick. So for me, the first step when I start in every image, I'll show you what application I use, which is Capture One. Capture One allows me to keep track of all of my images from a session. I use it to store my images. I often shoot tether right into Capture One if I'm in the studio and sometimes on location. But I prefer Capture One to Lightroom just because it gives me a little bit more versatility for my type of photography, primarily fashion. I feel like the colors are a little bit more dynamic for raw images whenever they come straight from the camera in Capture One. And in addition, it does give me the flexibility to play with layers when making adjustments. So that allows me to tweak a little bit more precisely in the future. So number one, as you can see, I have a couple of images from my shoot. I didn't think it was necessary to put all of them in here, but we can start off with this one. So the first thing I normally do is that I go ahead and play with the lens correction, and I remove as necessary any type of distortion or something that can be distracting from an image, especially if I was shooting with a wide angle lens. For example, this image was shot on a 24mm lens, and there is some distortion. Some of it is gonna stay there. But I think we can remove some of it. So what I'm going to do is turn all of these things on and play around with the distortion and like just bring it in a little. So like especially the face area, it's not super stretched out and distorted. So this is what it looked like. I'm going to bring it down just a bit. In addition, I am going to remove some of the vignetting generated by the lens. So I feel like that can be a little distracting. That's the darkness on the edges. This was the original. Now we're going to remove some of it. Let's see, a little bit with the sharpness there. Cool. Now, after I've done any type of like lens correction, then I look for any major flaws within the images that may need to be corrected. And in this one, as you can see, the highlights are blown, especially here in the sky. So what I'm going to do is just go to the quickly go to adjustments. And let's see what we can do with the highlights. Let's see if we can bring them up a little so we can get a little bit more sky in there. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I think that's going to be a key part of this image and making it pop. Shadows, not necessarily. I'm going to bring it up just slightly so we get a little bit more of the face in there. And after I make any general adjustments such as exposure, maybe adjusting the white balance if necessary. Even though I like the way this came out, I think the white balance was pretty on point. The exposure seems to also be on point, at least for the subject. Now I move into colors, which is what I wanted to specifically do today. So what I'm gonna do is jump right into colors, and let's go into the color editor in Capture One. And here I normally go right into the advanced settings. And what I do is that I focus on the major colors and the adjustments I would like to see within those colors. In this specific image, I think the colors I'm going to address is going to be the blue of the sky, which I wanted to really, really pop. So we're going to get a little bit more saturation out of that blue and maybe add a little bit of a teal tint to it. And then we're going to make some changes to the green as I think they can be a little bit distracting. So we're going to tone those down, the bit of the green on the trees in the background to really allow the model to pop from the screen. Perfect. So let's go to advanced. I'm going to pick Let's select the selection tool here, and I'm just gonna go to blue. Now, after I have blue selected, I am going to go on the bottom here and select view selected color range so that I can see how much blue we're selecting. And I am going to expand it a little bit further. Now, because color correcting is only the second part of my process, this image will eventually go into Photoshop. I don't pay attention to some of the smaller details, as I know some of these adjustments I can do later on in Photoshop. For example, I can see that the skirt here, the blues are being affected and they're becoming a little bit more vibrant. I'm going to choose to ignore it just for now because that's something that I can remove later on in Photoshop. So let's continue to select as much blue as possible. And now what I'm going to do with the blues is that I'm going to try and make it as vivid as I can. So I'm probably going to increase the saturation just a bit while still remaining. I'm not going to go crazy with it because you can see that doesn't look good. So I'm just going to increase it just a tiny little hint so that it looks a bit more vibrant. I'm going to remove the selection so I can compare it to her skin tone as we go. And I'm also going to shift the hue just slightly so that we move to a little bit more of a teal in the sky. That's a little bit too much, I think. Probably going to play with it here, and I'm going to play with the smoothness. I'm going to increase it a bit. I sometimes do play with the lightness. I don't think I'm going to on this one. I may bring it down a little bit just because it helps separate the model from the background a little. So I think that can be beneficial. And let's bring it a little bit more teal. Perfect. Now, the next color that I mentioned I wanted to adjust here is the greens. So you can see some of these greens can be pretty vibrant and pretty distracting. So let's select them and let's see how much of them are we getting. I'm going to expand this so we have, make sure we get all shades of green. And what I'm going to do is I am going to change the hue of the green so they're reduced and a little bit more muted. And I'm just going to decrease the saturation just slightly. I still want them to be green because since the image is going to be a full color image, I just don't want it to be as distracting. Here are some of the changes we've done so far. So it's gone from this to that. So as you can see, we've only done a couple little things and the image has already come to life. It's become much more vivid. It's much more vibrant, which was the goal for this image. Now, after I do this major changes, I would normally look if there's any other major color that we would like to highlight and change. For example, I could probably play with the pink in the jacket. This is something that I'm not going to do as it is fairly true to color. And it was very, very bright on the day that we were shooting. Now that I have the major colors done, the next step for me is just do some minor changes to the skin. Right now, her skin tone seems to be pretty close to what it was in person. So we're not probably going to make too many crazy adjustments. But what I normally do is that I go into skin tone, go to the selection tool, select her skin tone. And here I do bring it a little closer so that we're truer to the skin tone as possible. And we can see what is selected. So we're going to remove some of the reds here and bring this a little closer to the brown area. Do this. Not so much probably there. Perfect. So now I have the skin. Now the one thing to keep in mind compared to the advanced tool is that the skin tone is much softer at it. So this is not going to make such a drastic change. So even if I play with a hue all the way across, as you can say, it won't make too many changes. So these are more refinements to the skin so that they match all the way across. So I'm not going to do much to it other than maybe increase the saturation a little, bring the lightness up just to make it a little bit brighter since we were shooting against the sun, but not much, just a tiny little hint. I think that looks good right there. And this is what we got so far. Perfect. Oh, I like that. I like the way it's starting to pop. It's really happening. It's really happening. Now, these are the basic changes I do to an image. Now, any further changes I'm going to make, I'm going to do those inside an adjustment layer, as the adjustment layer is going to give me a little bit more versatility. Like if I go a little bit too heavy on something, I can just reduce the opacity to reduce its effect. So we're going to go ahead and make a new layer, new filled layer. And inside of this fill layer, we're going to start making some more specific adjustments to the image. And here, number one is going to be, we're going to start playing with curves. So I'm going to go into curves, and I normally play with an S curve. I'm playing with the blacks a little. So I am going to pull this in. Just so we pull in the blacks a little, I feel like this is going to make the image a little bit sharper. And I normally go for sharper images, and I do want the contrast to be up for the most part. And I'm gonna pull the white in just slightly. Now I'm gonna make a slight S with my layer, and as you can see, this is the before and after. It just makes everything pop a little bit more. It makes it a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more punchy, which I really enjoy and like. Now, after I play with the curves and I kind of have the look that I'm going for, I then move into color balance and just play a little bit with the skin when it comes to temperature. And I am also going to do that in a different layer, so another fill layer. And let's go into color balance. And here what I do is that I play with the shadows, midtones, and highlights so that I can make the skin give the kind of temperature I would like to have. So in this case, I want my highlights to go to the warmer side. So we're just going to give it a little bit of a yellow hint, a little bit of a yellow tone. And I'm going to go to my shadows, and I'm going to go to the opposite, kind of like purpley blue. And normally I do try to use opposite colors of the color wheel when playing with the color balance. So if I give my shadows a blue tone, I will go to the complete opposite, which is a yellow tone, and all the way with the color wheel, just as a way of balancing it out. I think that works really, really well. They complement one another, and like this is a change that is done so far. It's a tiny little hint, but I think it gives you the idea that the sun is back here in the image. You have that bit of a yellow tint to it that you will expect to see when you see the sun. And then when it comes to the midtones, let's see. We may play with a little bit of like orangey red just to make the image a bit warmer, but not too much that is crazy. Just a tiny little hint. I think I like that there. And here I'll show you the before and after. So these are the changes we've done so far. Perfect. Now that we have that, let's see the dynamic range to see if we need to make any changes in the layer, even though we already made these changes at the beginning on the background layer. I'm just going to add another fill layer, and we're going to go ahead and play with the dynamic range and see if it's necessary. Bring the highlights down just a little bit. I feel like there we may be going too much, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. I may bring up the shadow just so the face stands out just slightly. Perfect. And I think that's about it. So for me, this is the main type of color editing I will do to an image. The only extra few things I may do is add a little bit of sharpening or add a little bit of noise, and that depends on the image. If it's a beauty image, I will do all of the sharpening and noise all the way in Photoshop. In this instance, I can probably go ahead and get away with adding the noise now, since it's not super close up to like the face and like pieces of hair and so on. So let's play with that real quick. Let's see if we can make the image just slightly sharper. It's a tiny hint. And we're going to add just the smallest amount of noise. I do zoom in so that I have an idea of what I'm seeing. And I normally don't do fine grain. Cubic grain, I like a little bit less. Just want a little hint so the image is a little more defined. That's it. Perfect. So now after I get to this stage in a photo shoot, what I do is that I can then go ahead and copy all of these changes and apply them to all of the images throughout the shoot. So this is how I get all my images to look consistent before taking them to Photoshop. So in this instance, I am going to go ahead and copy it. And I do that by hitting this arrow right here with the image selected. And then I'll go to another image within the shoot and hit the down arrow, which will paste the adjustments. And as you can see, this did bring over the same settings we had on here. Now, the one thing I noticed is that now I may need to make some smaller micro adjustments to this image just so that it looks okay. I feel like this one needs to be slightly brighter, so we may bring the exposure up just a little bit, but all of the major changes are going to remain the same. So I'm just going to go ahead and play with the exposure just a tiny bit and lift the shadow just a tiny bit. And I feel like that works. And now we're matching. Awesome. Now, once again, let me show you the before and after. Wrong thing. We got before, we have after, before and after. Same thing here. Before and after. Perfect. I hope you guys found this helpful. And if you did, please feel free to subscribe below, leave a comment. And like always, thank you. I greatly appreciate your time.